very privileged to share my story. It's a true story. Even though I'm an Italian, I don't have to embellish this story at all. So it's just the facts. And I think what I'd like to do is start, like Denise mentioned some things that very common in her story with my story, and I'd like to start by saying our Blessed Mother saved my life. And I owe her my life for that. And I hope that I can share this story to where it enriches your life. There's two things, there's two elements that I think you'll find at the end of my story that will come home very hard with tremendous impact. Although my words really can't explain the love that our Blessed Mother has for each and every one of us, and the love and the mercy that her son Jesus has. The story will give, hopefully, greater definition. I know everybody in here has faith, or you wouldn't be here. But the power of faith is, I think, something that I'll be able to give some greater definition to. And like Denise mentioned, Blessed Sister Faustina, what goes with that is trusting in Jesus. My story, now I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I went to Catholic school, as Denise did. Then I attended a Catholic university, Loyola, in New Orleans. And practiced the Catholic religion much like Denise mentioned, as an obligation, at least up until a point in time where I got out of the house. And then even began to drift even further. After graduating from college, I worked in the family truck line, which most of you are familiar with, Saia Motor Freight. And then in 1986, Saia was sold by the family to a publicly traded company. And they asked me to stay and run it as president. I did. And then 6 years later, after meeting a financial group out of New York, I attempted to buy that company, which had bought Saia, and failed. And then in 1992, after failing in my attempt to buy the company, and after thinking hard about, what do I do with my life? I'd been working in that family business for 22 years. I decided that I should resign. I had bid for that company against a rival who had won, and so there was some animosities, as is so common in the world today. And I decided to resign, and I did, and I didn't know what to do. And then, because the only thing I knew was transportation, I invented a product called a pallet reefer. The product was the invention that really came to me after being in for a moment I got into a seafood venture because there's so much seafood down here. And I had done a lot of traveling in my work, and I couldn't get fresh seafood in Dallas and in Memphis and in Atlanta and in Jackson and in Little Rock and in these places. And so I started, the idea was to sell fresh seafood to those cities. And when I called refrigerated truck lines, they said, we can't come pick it up today. We have one schedule a week that leaves to Dallas, or one schedule a week that leaves to Little Rock or to Atlanta. And I was shocked because in the trucking I had been in, which handled dry goods, we were able to tell anybody we'll pick you up every day and then provide next day delivery on nuts and bolts or on paint or on things that don't spoil. But because there's so few refrigerated shipments, it takes a week to fill a truck. And so my invention, and I want to get past this rather quickly, my invention was to utilize the hot trucks, the trucks that go everywhere every day. And I invented this apparatus called a pallet reefer. which is a self-contained refrigeration unit. It has the footprint of a pallet, and you can load it with a forklift onto a hot truck that may be 140 degrees on the inside in summer days like we're having right now. And so all of a sudden, these people that could ship only once a week now could ship every day, any time of the day they wanted, and they could use millions of hot trucks that they couldn't use before. And I'm talking about the shippers of temperature-controlled products like food. That went very well, and I started in the South here, and then within a couple of years' time, I had, I started it in 1989, and within a couple of years' time, by 1992 when I had resigned, I had felt pretty, the idea was there, and I had felt pretty comfortable that I could resign and go forward with this, and I did, and it was very successful. It was so successful that I decided to sell half so that I could commercialize this invention nationwide, and I needed funds to do that. And then I ended up with 4 patents in 22 countries, and I thought that maybe it could even be something that could be beneficial to people throughout the world. So I thought maybe we could even globalize it. I hired an expert in New York City, an expert in licensing of technologies. He had searched long and hard for him, and at the end of my research and my investigation, I ended up in New York City again. This gentleman had done a lot of work with Coca-Cola and with Phillips Petroleum, all these big companies. And I hired him for a year, and we traveled looking for a partner. We found a partner by the end of that year, and it was it was Grumman. Northrop was not in the picture. It was Grumman Corporation. Grumman builds military jet fighters. They also build all the wings that go on the space shuttles and the Apollo space program. Every wing that was ever built, Grumman built, and they're out of New York. Grumman took 50% of this invention, and they financed the commercialization of it nationally and then globally with $25 million. And the business became very, very, very successful. At that same time, and now we're in 1993, and at that same time, Grumman got bought out by Northrop. Northrop builds the B-2 stealth bomber. Now, the gentleman that I had known at Grumman, as oftentimes happens with these acquisitions, they left the company because they had these golden parachutes, and they left with millions of dollars, and they retired. And then new men came to serve on the board of directors of my company, of my joint venture, and they were appointed by the new owner, Northrop. Northrop and Grumman together, by the way, built 80% of the military jet fighters that we have in the United States today. These new gentlemen, we treated them with a lot of respect, and they came to Homa, and they visited myself and my staff, and they said, we don't really know if we want to be in this type of business. We're not so much in trucking as we are, we're not so much truckers as we are builders of jet fighters. And we might just want to stay with the jet fighter business. And I said, fine. But they said, we'd like to spend some time doing due diligence, learning about the business. And if we don't like this type of business, we'll just sell our half back to you. So we worked very hard here in Homa, myself and a staff of about 7 or 8 of us, providing them with information, with answers to all their questions. It took about 4 or 5 months. And as I recall, the last part of their due diligence was to visit some of the bigger customers. Now, we were handling the day-to-day business, the Homer operation was. I made arrangements to bring them to California, Menlo Park, California, right outside of San Francisco. And it was supposed to be the completion of their research on whether or not they wanted to stay in this business. And the customer that I brought them to, if I'd have wrote a script for that customer, it would not have been as great of a testimony as what the customer actually said. They just went on and on about how much money they were making with this invention. and how many more thousands more of these units they needed. They had 1,000 at the time, and they needed 6,000 more. We couldn't build them fast enough. And when they took us to dinner, they were a $3 billion truck line, as a matter of fact. And we had the president and the CEO and the top level people there, and they took us to dinner, and it went great. And so after we said goodbye to them, and we're departing, I stopped these two new Northrop appointees to this company, this joint venture, and I said, have y'all decided what y'all would like to do with this business opportunity? Would y'all like to stay in it? And I mentioned about the prospects being so great and about how well we were doing. And they said, we have decided. And we decide that we love the business. We just don't like owning 50%. And I hadn't thought at all about that proposition. They said, we'd like your half. And I said, well, I really don't know how much I want to sell it or how much I'd ask for my half. And they looked me in the eyes in the parking lot, and they said, we would like to give you $2 million. And I said, well, really, that doesn't seem very fair because we're going to make that much this year. And we have 15 years left of these patents. And they said, like this, with the finger, you don't understand. If you don't take the $2 million for your half, when we're through with you, you will have nothing. You will be broke and you will be bankrupt. Now, I am going to omit the comment that I made after they said that, okay? Okay. But we left, and we didn't leave on very good terms. I called I asked them, I said, why don't we talk about this at the San Francisco airport? We each have 2 hours to wait for midnight flights out. We had red-eye flights out. And I said, why don't we just sit down and talk when we get to the airport? We have 2 hours to wait. They said, we don't want to talk to you. We want you to go home, and we want you to think about our offer, our only offer. So I called my wife when I got to the airport, who was working in the business. And I said, they like it so much they want to take it from us. They want to get rid of us. And I got to tell you, it was a terrible flight back. And now I want to just stop and tell you about where I was spiritually at that time in my life. And I'm not very proud of it. There's going to be some things I say tonight that I'm not going to be very proud of at all. I wasn't as good of a church, even though I had been brought up the way Catholics are brought up. Catholic school, you go to church on Sunday. I wasn't even in the league of where Denise was at her worst point. I might have felt guilty for missing on Christmas and Easter. Maybe. I know God was, looking back now, I know God was in my life all along. But I never gave God credit, Jesus credit for anything. God the Father, and Jesus our Savior, and our Blessed Mother. I said the prayers, and I believed. I got to say I believed. But when anything good happened, it was me. When God-incidental things occurred, they were coincidental. Or luck. I was living the worldly life for pleasures. My ambition wasn't eternal life. My ambition was to be the great businessman. The example I was setting for my children was deplorable. The friends that I had, I don't have today. And I'll just stop at that. There's a little more that's going to be a little bit harsh, but then there's good parts that do come. Once I got back from California, I said, maybe these people we'll just rethink things and something different will happen. Well, let me tell you, I was mistaken. There was, a year later, and we're in 1995 now. Well, we're at the end of 95. Their words had come true. I had gone from being very successful with about $1 million in the bank to being broke. Exactly what they said they were going to do, they did. We had litigation in Louisiana. We had litigation in Delaware. We had litigation in New York, all at the same time. I had hired some of the best lawyers I could find initially in New Orleans. As a matter of fact, my lawyer, y'all would know him probably if you read the sports page. He owns the Zephyrs, Rob Kuig. He's with Adams and Reese. And it had gotten to a point to where I couldn't pay my lawyers anymore. Mr. Kuig called me and he said, Mr. Saia, I don't know how to tell you this, but we can't continue to represent you without any payments. Now, I had mortgaged my home. I had sold property that I had owned. Every single thing that I could borrow on, I borrowed on. Every single asset that I owned, I encumbered. I mean, I borrowed on it. And I had the lenders take liens out on that. I had went to my family who had lent me money. My dad had lent me a couple of $1 million. And at this point, in just a year, I was already broke. The week my lawyers had quit me, I didn't know what to do, but anxiety began to fill me. And when I tell you anxiety, I thought maybe I knew what stress was before that, but I really didn't. I mean, I'm talking about the kind of anxiety that's like panic, like a panic attack. I'm talking about the kind of anxiety that keeps you from sleeping or that wakes you up from your sleep. I was a real smart guy. Guess what I did? I started to drink then. Started drinking. Alcohol was going to really help my problems. With that, I also was becoming very angry with the people that loved me. My family, my friends, my associates at work, who were sticking in there through some real tough times. Began to wake up every night. Couldn't sleep. Had an island in the kitchen. And I paced around this island so frequently during these anxiety attacks that I wore, it was a wooden floor, and I wore the wood down. You could see the trail on the floor. Every night, and it was at 3 o'clock. And I'm not, I know a lot of people relate to 3 o'clock, but every night at 3 or thereabout, I'd wake up. Smoke about 3 cigarettes. Drink milk, drink a glass of milk. Because I also had ulcers at the time. And the devil began to play on me, Satan himself. I came from a background, I live in Homer now and I'm proud to be here, but I was brought up and raised in New Orleans, in and around a lot of Italian people. And I can tell you that if my buddy Gino Radasta had somebody pull up to his restaurant with a bulldozer on a Saturday night when it was full, he would shoot the guy that was driving it. And my lawyers are still hanging in there, but they're about to quit me. My funds I'm beyond broke. I mean, now I went from $1 million to selling or borrowing on everything, and now I'm $2 million in debt, $2 million in the hole. And I'm thinking, well, now what can I do? And there was nothing left to do financially. And I'm thinking, well, these guys are bad guys. And they're stealing everything I've ever worked for, and they're destroying my family's opportunities that I had planned for them. And I'm getting the terrible thought of killing Not the guys that were in the parking lot. Not the messengers. But the top executives of Northrop Grumman Corporation. Matter of fact, I saw one on TV yesterday, on CNN. And I'd only met him once before with Senator Bennett Johnston in Lake Charles. And I fought with that thought at night, during the day, for weeks. And then the inevitable happened. The lawyers quit. We're in 1996. And I asked my wife, I said, we got Delaware litigation coming up next week. Now, I do still have my Delaware lawyers. The lawyers that had quit were the lawyers that I was using in New York. I said, I need airfare. And she says, we only have $60 left in our checking account. And the anxiety is growing. I've been to a doctor now, I'm taking Valiums. The blue ones, 5 or 6 a day. And I still can't sleep. And then the devil's back again, Satan himself. He's saying, you know, if your son went to war and he killed some strangers, you would tell him, son, you fought for your nation. You fought for freedom. You fought in self-defense. You fought evil. It's not a sin. At least that's what I thought back in 1996. That's what I thought I'd tell my son. My views have changed today, but that's what I thought then. And I said, you know, my family's a lot dearer to me than my nation. And I am fighting an evil entity, an evil people. Now, at this point in time, I've decided to throw the towel in and they win. I default. I've got no more money, and exactly what they told me in the parking lot is that you need to take our offer or we're going to break you. Has come true. I've quit as far as fighting them. Haven't told them that, but I don't even have the money to go up to our next round of litigation. And I was crazy enough to even tell my wife, I'm going on a week fishing trip. Just in case I wanted to fall to the devil's temptation, Satan's temptation. I was ashamed to tell her what I was thinking. We're going to get by this hard part in a minute. And then, the week before the litigation was to restart again, I've given up. She says, let's go to church. You know what I told her? I said, my wife's name is Cindy. I said, Cindy, don't you see the floor in the kitchen by the island? I can't sit down for 5 minutes. I'm taking 5 and 6 Valiums a day. And you expect me to go to church and sit down for an hour? I said, besides that, last night, Bruno fought Tyson. You weren't watching it, but I was. And Bruno kept making the sign of the cross. And Tyson's the bad guy. And he annihilated him. So I tell her, no, you go to church. Well, she goes to church, and it's really playing heavy in my mind. I've already decided that I've lost every legal remedy to my problem, but I'm still tossing around this idea from Satan. This idea from the Godfather movies, you know? This idea from my old friends, from those circles. Because if that's going to happen, it's going to happen Monday, and it's Sunday. Let me tell y'all, the anxiety got so bad that I thought it went into a she walked out that house, it became a panic attack to where truly I felt like I could die. Truly I felt like I could explode from the inside. It got so bad that I felt like I had to get out the house. But I had a better idea. I ran to the medicine cabinet. I said, let me get a Valium. And when I got there, the bottle was empty. I don't know about the men in this room, but I know what some of the housewives, they know what it means when they go to the medicine cabinet in the Valiant and everything. But I said, what am I going to do? I'm in a panic situation. The worst I have ever felt in my life. Death would have been welcome. Not that I was thinking suicide. Maybe I was thinking about killing other people. Well, I wasn't thinking about killing myself. But I got to tell you, death would not, it was pure agony. And so I played high school football 20 years prior, and I said, maybe I went and I found some tennis shoes, and I said, maybe if I run, this anxiety will go away, because I can't take it. I was in a real panic situation. I put the tennis shoes on, and as I'm tying my tennis shoes, I think to myself, the reason I have all this anxiety is because of the thought of killing a human being. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? Nothing. I'm not going to kill anybody. I can't do that. That's what's causing me all this pain. Then I really felt helpless, because I've decided that I have no way to continue to litigate. And the only other thing I could do myself to control the situation was something of violence physically. So I've given up prospects of litigation, not because I wanted to give up, but because I'm broke and bankrupt. And then I give up the prospect of the only thing left in my control is physical violence. And I decided this is what's making me so sick. So I decided not to do that. Put the tennis shoes on. And I'm saying, my God, I hope this can pass. And I began to run down a gravel road. I get about 600 feet back down this gravel road. And the road turns. If it was coming from where y'all are looking, it comes back and it turns. It turns to the left. And when you make the turn, about 300 feet down the road going this way, is a little office building where we conducted the business of this, that we were all fighting over, where this invention, where the business of this invention was being conducted. And I see somebody, I'm about 300 feet away, and I see someone on the porch. And I think to myself, that is my secretary. What a good, first good thought I had. Because I was so angry at the time. I said, what a good girl to be there on a Sunday. Whatever she's doing, I mean, she's not being paid. She's there. She cares. I continue to jog. And when I get about 30 feet, the road's right here, and the porch is like at the head of this table here. And when I get about 30 feet on an angle like I am to this lady at the end of the table, I look up to wave to my secretary, but it's not her. On the porch, hands in prayer, is a woman with a white veil, linen veil, and a white gown. My thought was, gee, now I'm hallucinating. I rub my eyes, and I'm still jogging. I'm getting closer. I rub my eyes, and I shake my head, and I look again, and now I'm about 15 feet away. And this time when I look, not only do I see her there, she still has her hands in prayer. I see a little bit of hair coming out her veil, and it's blowing in the breeze. They had a breeze that day. And I see her eyebrows, I see the wrinkles on her gown, and her eyebrows, and her eyes. They were very blue, 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 blue. A blue like I've never seen. But the woman didn't look supernatural. There was no halo. There was no light illuminating from her. It was odd that she was dressed in clothes like women wore in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. But other than the clothing, there was nothing If you would see her in our type clothing on Canal Street, you might say she's a beautiful woman, but I don't think you'd say anything more. She was rather short, about 5'3". And I got scared, because now I know I'm not hallucinating. Too close and I'm seeing too much. So at this point, I'm about at the same distance I am right now from this nice lady right here at the end of this table. And I decide that I'm going to kick it up a notch, and I'm going to run past that porch and keep running as fast as I can. And that's what I did. I started to run fast. And when I got directly across from that porch, she was looking straight out the whole time. Never did look at me. But when I got directly in front of that porch when I was passing, I looked as I ran past, and when I looked, her eyes hit me, and I was stopped cold in my tracks. So now I'm standing there about 10, 12 feet away. She's still like this, and her eyes are touching my eyes, straight in my tracks. I don't know what to do. It's kind of like I felt like a palooka, like a dummy. I didn't get on my knees. I wasn't very religious. She looked like a holy person, the way she was dressed and the way her hands were. And I just stood there, and she read my mind. Her face was not smiling, and it wasn't frowning. It was serious. She had a serious face. And we're eye to eye, and she reads my mind. And she says to me, I am praying to protect you. The next thing she says was the answer not only to my problem at that point in time, that terrible situation I've explained that I was in, was the answer to my life. She says, like the answer to all my problems, she says, just have faith in my son, Jesus. That was it. That simple. Not a lot of words. All these Harvard lawyers and Yale lawyers and hotshots all over the country made my problem so complex with that business situation. She solves the business situation, but more importantly, the situation of losing my life, not only here, but I'm talking not only here through dying from stress of living a wrong life, but also saves my life, my eternal life, with just one sentence, about 5 words. Just have faith in my son, Jesus. Guess what I do then? I don't pray. I don't get on my knees. And I know she's married because she said my son, Jesus. I walk. It's like a magnet. I'm not even thinking. I'm just doing things. And I walk up to her. And when I got as close as I am to these statues right here that I can almost touch, I got to tell you, she looked as human as anybody in this room. Then, after looking at her, no thinking going on, just doing, I decide that I want to touch her. It wasn't a decision. I just moved to go touch her on. It's like a magnet, more like a magnet than any decisive type thing. She's standing on a porch, so she's higher. And that's how I know she's 5'3", is because I could measure how far her head went up on the post that holds the porch up. But anyway, when I went to touch the bottom part of her arm from her elbow to her hand, I also moved my head closer. And when my eyes, I was almost to the point of touching her, and when my eyes got about 8 inches away, I realized that it took, my hand would go through. So then I backed off about the distance I am, about 3 feet from these statues. And she looked as flesh as we do, as solid and as flesh as any human being does. Which is when then I decided that I needed to get on my knees and pray. So I got on my knees and I prayed the Hail Mary. And when I opened my eyes, she was gone. But I had just been through I had gone from the worst despair that I've ever had in my life. And I've had people I've loved die. I've had accidents, illnesses, that type of thing. But nothing compared. Like I said, death would have been welcome. I felt the worst despair I'd ever felt in my life when I approached that porch, when I was jogging, when I left the house. But now, I had lost my fear of her when I walked towards her. And at the same time, I went from, like a light switch, from the worst moment of my life to the best moment of my life in a matter of a second. Didn't even realize it until after she had gone. And the peace that I felt, there was no anxiety. There was no panic. But not only was there not anxiety and there was not panic, but I had never felt the joy and the peace in my entire life like I felt then. And it wasn't leaving me, it was with me. Now I'm going to continue the good part of the story is now. Okay? It's all good from this point forward, and it's great, and I think you're going to love the rest of the story. But before I tell the rest of the story, I want to pass around a picture of what she looked like. And I want to tell you before I pass it, I'm going to start it right here, and by the time I'm finished this, y'all will have all seen it. Maybe 10 times. No, I'm kidding. No, but this picture came to me, and I'll tell you how I met the gentleman, Father Paul Bergeron, who's back here. He came to my house one day, about 9 months after the apparition. And we had become friends around this time frame, and I'll tell you how we met. But he came by and he said, look at this. And he didn't tell me it was Mary. And when he showed me the picture, it was a small one. It wasn't his size. It was smaller. And when he showed me the picture, that put me to my knees. I had been keeping her face in my memories every day. And I'll get to this point, but thought about her face constantly. And when he showed it to me, I went to my knees and I said, where did you get it? He said, Lou, he said, I was in Medjugorje and there were some people from Maryland, the state of Maryland, there on a pilgrimage. And they have a church in Maryland, in Edmonston, Maryland, where the Blessed Mother is appearing today. Even as we speak right now, she's still appearing there. And this woman got a National Geographic sketch artist. And she described Mary to the National Geographic sketch artist. And the woman had this sketch made. Well, let me tell y'all, this is the woman I saw. Different clothing. She had more like a nun's veil and a pure white linen gown. Not what you see her clothed in here, as the woman sees her in Maryland. But her face, unmistakable. Because it's black and white, I'll tell you that her hair was a light brown, like a chestnut brown. And her eyes were that blue, 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 beautiful blue eyes. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass this around, and then I'll tell you the rest of the story. The story, I get home that day from the jog, and my wife returns from church, and like Denise, I didn't say anything at first. But I felt, she looked at me and she said, what happened to you? I said, what do you mean? And then I spoke a little bit, and she said, she says, my prayers are answered. She says, your wrinkles are gone? She says, that ugly, nasty face that you've been carrying around for the last half a year, it's gone. And she says, and then when you spoke, she says, I haven't heard you speak like this. And I don't know how, I've never heard you speak like this. What happened? I said, well, I feel, I'm at peace right now. And I didn't tell her. About 3 hours later, my parents had come by. And, the way I said it, they were all talking. Then I finally had the courage, and I said, as soon as it was time for me to speak, which is, I would always butt in before. I said, I saw the Blessed Mother Mary on the porch in the back earlier today. They bring my wife to the back and they say, we got to get him to the hospital. They said, these people have him, they've broken. And my father said, look, he said, the reason I can't let him, well, you can't beat these big guys. You picked the wrong fight, son. And let me tell you furthermore, he said, whenever they're through beating you up and you have nothing left and you need to get started again, maybe I'll lend you something then, but I couldn't lend you any now. That's why he wasn't, there was no one willing to lend at the time. But he told my wife, he says, we got to get him to the hospital. He's going off the edge. It's some kind of chemistry, chemicals in his brain must be. Well, anyway, the only time I said a rosary prior to then, I hadn't said, in those days I didn't say rosaries. The only time I had ever said a rosary then, I think I had said one when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was around people saying one when I was 7, 8 years old at my grandmother's. And then at the funerals, they used to say rosaries. But other than funerals, I just didn't say the rosary. So what I did was, I was at peace like I'd never been in my life. And what I did was I prayed without a rosary. I just prayed. That day, that Sunday, the next morning I woke up and I felt great. I thought it might have been gone or something, but it wasn't. I woke up and I was at peace. And I was so happy to be alive. And I was so appreciative of my wife. And I just felt so good. And I just started praying. Our Fathers, Hail Marys, Glory Be's. No certain order. Drive to work, praying when I drive. Get to work. If nobody's talking to me, guess what I'm doing? I'm praying. I'm just praying. Whenever I'm not having a conversation with someone, I'm praying. Well, that evening, I'm praying on the couch in my house. By this time, I probably said that day about 500 prayers. Prayed all day. And I can't get it out of my mind what happened. And I got to tell y'all something. Every day of my life. That's 2.5 years ago. That was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1996. But I got to tell you, the day after, March 18th, couldn't get it out of my mind what had happened and the way I felt, how good I felt, and how much a Blessed Mother must have loved me, because I was a terrible person, and how merciful her Son was to allow it. And I just prayed, and I was so thankful, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. I thought, I got to tell you, to this day, I can't get it out of my mind. Every day, it's all. The majority of what I think of is Mary and Jesus. But I'm praying on the couch, and all of a sudden I smell roses. And then I taste them in my saliva, in my spit, in my saliva. And then I start to tingle. Then it starts to be an electrical current. And then I don't know, the TV in the room is oblivious to me. My wife is oblivious. I'm numb. I'm beginning to get a little afraid, and I can feel it. And the thing that came to me in my heart, without audible words, but what came to me in my heart was that I shouldn't quit the litigation. Should continue to try to fight, even though I don't have any money or lawyers. But then I also remember what she told me the day before. What did she say? She said, just have faith in my Son, Jesus. So I did kind of like Sister Faustina, Blessed Faustina. I trusted it. On March 16th, 1996, up until that point in my life, Saia was in control. And Saia decided what he was going to do, when he wanted to do it, and how he was going to do it. And he controlled his life. He controlled his successes. He earned his successes. He made his successes come. Let me tell you, after that one sentence from our Blessed Mother on March 17th, by March 18th, Louisiana didn't see any way, and I didn't care. I remembered to just have faith. And I did like Blessed Sister Faustina, and I trusted. It was out of my hands from that day forward. All I did was pray. And guess what happened? 2 lawyers popped up the next day. Of course, the next day, I'm just praying. I didn't have a rosary yet. Nobody had given me one yet. Praying, and of course, I'm praying, and it happens again. The smell of the roses, the taste of the roses, the tingling, the electricity, the numbness. And to make a long story short, what I'm going to tell you all is that for over a year from the day I saw the Blessed Mother, her grace has stayed with me, and I had, I don't know if you call it a locution or if you call it the frisson, so if you call it was heaven. But I had him for over a year, and it guided me for over a year. And I'll tell you what happened. Two lawyers show up out of the blue. They had heard about my other lawyer quitting. And they spoke with myself and my staff for a day. And they said, we'll take this case. No money, on a contingency, on a percentage. I had faith, and I was trusting, and it was happening. And I continued to pray. And then, by the end of that week, I had made an appointment with a financial group out of North Carolina. They're called Volvo Credit. Just like you have GM Credit, Ford Credit, it was Volvo Credit. And at the time I had made that appointment, which was weeks prior, I had met with the banks in Houma, the banks in New Orleans, the banks in Dallas, the banks in Atlanta, the banks, everybody I knew, my family. I had met with them, and they'd all said, no more money. You have no more assets. There is nothing to lend you on. And I had forgotten about this appointment, probably because I was doing so much praying. And he gets to the office in Houma, and I said, I'm so sorry that you've come, because, my financials really aren't looking very well. And everybody else had told me that my financials were terrible and they couldn't lend on it. I felt bad about this guy coming. So I showed him the financials, and then I told him the story that y'all just heard. The exact story y'all just heard. And after about 3 hours, he says, Mr. Saia, your financials are terrible, just like you say. I mean, I couldn't lend you a penny on these financials. And I was asking for $5 million. But he says, I will lend you the $5 million on your story. I said the same thing to John. I went home, I said, this guy's, he's pulling my chain. This guy. The next day, he says, I'm an executive vice president. He says, I can't sign on anything over that without going to the committee and the board. But he says, I can sign up to $5 million, and I'm going to lend you the $5 million on your story, because I think everything you've told me is true. And he says, I think you're going to beat these big boys, this big mammoth company. The next day, I think he's pulling my chain. Guess what? I get a fax, and it says, we've approved your $5 million loan. I approved the $5 million loan. And then this 2-page fax. The first sentence says he approves the loan. The next page and a half, he talks about Jesus Christ. Truly an angel. First time I ever met the man in my life. Well, through my faith and through my trust, I was back in action again. So we're off to Delaware. I'm going to bring you all from March to May. I remember the days perfectly. It's May. We have a trial date, May 6th, in Delaware. I have used my Delaware lawyers for 6 months at least. Probably more like 9. 2 sets of lawyers there. A couple of $100,000 already, with another $100,000 bill waiting. And they called me crying, Mr. Saia, we just got a call from the judge, and he called us to his chambers. And he called their lawyers as well. And he told us that he is going to rule in their favor because it's the court's statutory right. They wanted to liquidate the company so that they could then get the patents through the liquidation, outbid me for the patents. They knew I was broke. And they said, everything you've paid us for and everything we've done is worth nothing. The judge said to tell you, don't come. I said, what? He said, to tell you it's not worth you coming. They said, Mr. Saia, this is a statute that he can rule on. The court has a right to rule on it. And the judge even told us he doesn't care who's right, who's wrong. He's ruling on this like a no-fault divorce. He don't care whose fault it is. He's going to do what they want him to do. Basically, they got a lot of power in Delaware, and the judge was fixed. They had talked to the judge, and the judge saw it their way, okay? The judge liked them. And so I hang up, and I'm so disappointed. I didn't lose my faith, but I was disappointed. And before I started to pray again, I told my wife, I said, it's really terrible with the call I just got. We lost. And there's, my lawyers are saying, don't throw good money after bad. Just don't come. Well, guess what? That evening I'm praying again. And when I tell y'all, the rose smell and the rose in the saliva and the electrical feeling, I don't even know if I remained in my home. I went into another zone. My Blessed Mother was there. And she said, go. So the next day I called them and said, I'm decided to come. They said, that's crazy. Throwing good money after bad. The judge has told us what he's going to do. He's going to rule from the bench in 5 minutes. I said, I'll pay you, but I'm going to come. They said, we're embarrassed to go. I said, I'm going to pay you. We're going to go. We go. We deposed 4 of their people from the Northrop Grumman side. We're in Delaware, my wife and I. They deposed us. And then we get to the trial date on Friday, May 6th, 1996. Every day when we were there, prior to that Friday, when we were in Delaware, we were there for about a week beforehand, they were saying, don't get your heart set, to my wife and I. Don't get your heart set. We don't even know why you're doing this. We're embarrassed. You've lost. We get there Friday to the Chancellery Court in Delaware. It's a Delaware State Court. And we walk in, and it's like a wedding. We got one side, they got one side. It's like a wedding, When we walk in, I'm expecting to see the 4 or 5 people that we had deposed and that were involved in this business with us. They got 15 to 20 people. They were so sure of what the judge was going to do. They had flown these big G5, $25 million jets, corporate jets in, with all the big shots. One from LA, one from New York. I see the big brass there. And they laughing, and they joking, and they giggling and smirking. And my lawyers are telling my wife and I, we told you so. And I got to tell you, I lost my faith. For a second, I lost my faith. Now remember, about a year and a half prior, in the parking lot, they had told me, we're going to buy your half. And they set the price at $2 million. And I told them, I didn't tell you what I told them, but I told you know what it was. I said, Mr. Shipley, who was their lead counsel, their lead attorney, I said, you know that offer you gave me a year and a half ago? I'll take it. I'll take that offer. He said, Mr. Saia, there's no more negotiations. He said, it is all over now. And then sure enough, the judge walks in the door to start the court. I grab my wife's hand and I go back to my faith. And I've never left it again since that day, since that moment. And I go back to my faith. And I'm praying, and I grab a hand and I'm praying in my mind. And I'm going to say it out loud so you can understand what was going through my mind. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't praying. It was pleading. I'm saying, Mary, please ask your son Jesus to touch the judge on his head and let him know they're using his court to steal innocent people's patents and life's work. Mary, please ask your son Jesus to touch the judge on his head and let him know they're using his court to steal innocent people's patents. Over and over and over. I kept, just over and over and over, I kept praying it while I held my wife's hand. In the meanwhile, before the judge had walked in, they were giggling and laughing. They were talking about the hotel they rented, the band, the hotel they had reserved, the band they rented, the cocktails and the hors d'oeuvres. They had a party planned. They had all got together, knowing what the outcome would be, with a big party to celebrate stealing these patents. Well, the judge starts, and I'm praying my prayer, pleading it, I should say. I had lost my faith for a moment, but went right back to it. And my lawyers had said, this will end in 5 minutes. He'll rule from the bench, and it's going to be over. And it didn't. But it looked terrible. They'd make argument, and then when my lawyers would try to argue back, they'd get cut short. And then the judge finally he looks at his watch and he says, it looks terrible for us. And he says, you know, it's Friday and I got an appointment. My wife and I have somewhere to go. He says, I've heard enough. I'm going to rule on this matter right now. And the judge, when he said that, I noticed that there was, like, if the judge's desk was here, there's a window on the outside wall here going up. This is an outside wall. And I noticed that the light intensified in that window. And I said, maybe that's from Jesus, or from God the Father, or from the Holy Spirit. Maybe. And I continued to pray, and plead, I should say. I continued to plead. And then he looked at them, and they were giggling. I guess they couldn't wait to go to that party they had planned. They were giggling. And he looked at them, and then he looked back at us, my wife and I. We were the only ones on our side. Then he looked back at them, and he looked at their lawyer, and he said, counsel, hypothetically, what if your client, and then he repeated my prayer, word for word. What if your client is using my court to steal these innocent people's patents? I know the judge was ready to do what he had told them he was going to do, rule their way. But when he looked at them, and then he looked at us, and he looked back, and he said that, and he repeated the prayer word for word, I knew where it came from. I knew my prayer had been answered. Sure enough, within 2 minutes, he was like this, yelling at the north of Grumman side of the room. In the last seconds, he changed his mind. In the last seconds. Now I got to tell you, I felt the greatest joy and peace I've ever felt when I saw the Blessed Mother appeared to me. But I felt some happy. And he ruled our way, and he slammed his gavel down, and he was out of there. And my wife started crying, and the two lawyers started crying. These two lawyers that said we didn't have a chance, they were crying. Even the clerk of court knew he changed his mind in the last seconds. This nice lady that takes care of the judge. And she started crying. And I wanted to cry, you know, but I held it back. I had seen Mary, the apparition that I had of Mary was in March. This was in May of '96. So it had only been 3 months. I'm still trying to be the tough guy, like I had been groomed to be in the circles I had run in New Orleans, or like out of the Godfather movie, you know? And so I'm holding it back. Well, let me tell you, we get outside the Chancery Court. It's like Canal Street. It's a big, big street at Rodney Square. And it was full of people Friday afternoon. And I tell the lawyers and my wife, I say, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette. Y'all go ahead. Well, as soon as they turn their back, I didn't have to smoke. As soon as they turned their back, the joyful tears hit me. I'd never had it happen in my life. Nothing had happened to me in my life up until 1996. But these joyful tears hit me and they erupted, and I couldn't take it. It was like a volcanic. And I put my right knee down, and I'm going to show you how in the middle of the sidewalk, I just couldn't take it, and I went like this. Right knee down, left arm here, with this hand over my eye. And I cried. I tried not to cry, the more I tried not to cry, the more I cried. I cried and I cried on that sidewalk. And I got people coming up to me, Mister, can we get you an ambulance? Mister, can we get you a doctor? Matter of fact, I had one doctor come. Mister, I'm a doctor, can I help you? And I could hardly talk. And I cried on that sidewalk. For the longest, my best guess, although I couldn't measure the time. And you can imagine kneeling on the side, busy crowded sidewalk crying. 15 minutes would seem like an eternity. So I think it was about 15 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. And it was, if it would have been an eternity, I would have taken it, because I had never felt. And when I say never felt, I want to let y'all know this. The peace and the joy and the happiness that I felt from the visit from our Blessed Mother was powerful, and it lasted for over a year every day. This was more powerful. I looked for Jesus or God the Father. I didn't see anybody, but I knew it was coming from God. More powerful, more intense joy and peace than when I had the apparition of Mary. Didn't last as long, because when it was over, it was over. In the case of the graces that our Blessed Mother left on me, it was for over a year. This was sudden and powerful. We were so happy, I said, let's go to Grand Isle. To my wife. We'll take a week off, you know. This has been so great. We go to Grand Isle, we come back home 2 weeks and 2 days. When we get home, the phone's ringing. I answer the phone. Now, at this point in time, I had met, it was Father Paul Bergeron. He says, Mr. Saia, I said, yes. He said, this is Father Paul Bergeron. I'd only met him once before, at that point in time. He says, you remember me? I'm friends with Rick Morales, and he had taken me to your hunting camp. I said, oh, yeah, Father. Well, what can I do for you? He said, my mother died about 15 years ago, around that time. And he says, I had a spiritual dream, all color, with a bright white light in it, and it was all color. And my mother comforted me, told me not, I missed her. I loved her very much, and he says, I missed her very much when she had died. And about 15 years ago, after she had died, she said, she comforted me, not to worry, she's in heaven. And I've never had another dream like that in all my years of being a priest, until recently. And I had one, and you were in it. I said, Father, that sounds powerful, you know. He says, I said, what happened? He said, well, I'd rather talk to you about it in person. I said, come on over. Just walked in the door from Grand Isle. I've been gone for 2 weeks and 2 days. Father Paul gets to my house. I'm barbecuing. I said, Father, tell me what happened in this dream. He says, Louis, you're in a misty field with fog and mist. And he says, I said, what am I doing? What am I doing? He says, you're kneeling. I said, Father, how am I kneeling? He goes like this. One knee. He says to me, he says, I don't know why, but you got your hand over your eyes. I don't know why. I don't say anything. I don't tell him anything. He says, you're wearing a blue suit, a white shirt, and a yellow tie. Guess what I was wearing the day I was in court, the day I was on that sidewalk crying? Then he says, but that ain't nothing. He says, and in front of you, about 9 feet tall, with wings 15 feet high, is Michael the Archangel. Sword drawn, and as you're kneeling, his sword is touching your head. Now, I had looked for Jesus, and I had looked for God the Father. I didn't think about Michael the Archangel. But Father Paul saw it in his dream. I'm thinking, wow. But of course, I think anything's possible, you know what I mean? I said, Father, before I tell, I got some interesting things to tell you, but before I tell you anything else, before I even open my mouth, you got to come in my house and look at my calendar and tell me when you had the dream. He looks. I said, take your time. He looks and he looks and he looks. He points to the calendar. The exact day of the court, the exact day I knelt and cried on that sidewalk. 2 weeks and 2 days prior. Exactly. From Delaware, now we're in New York. And I'm going to bring you all to June 1996. We go to New York. The litigation in New York ends up being about a year and a half. I'm praying, and by now I got a rosary. So and let me tell you something. I got the weapon, and I'm ready to use it. So I'm praying, and when I say pray, first thing I did when I got to New York City was I found a hotel close to the courtroom. It was arbitration, close to the arbitration room. But I also made sure it was equally as close to St. Patrick's Cathedral on 5th Avenue. St. Patrick's was my refuge. I would go to the church every morning very early, say a rosary with my wife. We'd go to court then. Having carried back holy water, which only Catholics have. The other denominations don't have holy water. Having carried back the holy water from St. Patrick's, we'd get to the courtroom early. And I would drop. Imagine pitchers of water on these tables here. I'd make my pass and I'd put 1 drop of holy water in every pitcher of water. I'd also, after Father Paul's experience with Father Paul, I'd grown very close to him. And so he had, before leaving Houma for New York, he had outfitted me with a package of blessed salt. That would go on a judge's chair. Every day. Now, if they lied, the hope was that they drink this holy water, and if they lied, they'd get caught. Or maybe they wouldn't be able to lie at all drinking holy water. After the court, at the end of the day, back to St. Patrick's for Holy Mass. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, after Holy Mass, the old-time benediction with the Eucharist. They got to know me so well at St. Patrick's that they made me part of their team. I was, clergy there. I was doing chores for them and passing the basket on Sundays and all that stuff. And I'm going to go through this kind of quick because I know y'all, it's getting late. But let me tell y'all what happens. First witness they put on. I'll call him Pinocchio. They put this witness on, and he starts off, and he says, they get the credentials. Where do you come from? I graduated first in my class at West Point Academy. After West Point Academy, he says, I went to Vietnam. Became an officer of the Green Beret. That's what I joined the Green Beret. I became an officer of the Green Beret. After the Green Beret, I did 2 tours in Vietnam. After Vietnam, I returned home and I entered Harvard and I got my MBA. Man, when this guy was finished, the arbitrator wanted his autograph,
And he's testifying, not on cross-examination with my attorney on the cross-examination, but with his own attorney, he's testifying on direct examination. And he's lying. Well, I notice he's also drinking the water. And I notice, and I'm praying the rosary. Let me tell you something. When I get to that court, the first 6 months, I prayed the rosary under the table, kind of hiding it. And then I said, why should I ever hide Jesus? Why should I not be proud of Jesus? So I started praying that rosary in the open, and I put my holy cards on my table in front of me. And as sure enough, as he would lie, I would notice like a red bee sting. Boom! Hit him in. He'd lie and he'd get a big red circular welt. A little while later, he'd lie again. Bam! Another one. A little while later, he'd lie again. Bam! Looked like he was a creature coming out the swamp. After he lied about a dozen times, you know. And then the arbitrator says, you know, he says, I know what he's thinking. He's thinking this guy looks like he needs the hospital or something. He says, let's take a recess. He figures his colleagues will tell him, look, your face is swelling up. You got big bee stings everywhere. Every time you lie, you got a bee sting. Or he figures the man will go to the men's restroom and he'll see it in the mirror. But when he hits the recess, the guy gets off the stand and his face completely clears up perfect. So his colleagues tell him, but they're not that concerned because he's fine now. And he goes to the men's restroom and they don't see anything because he's fine now. He comes back, he's fine. He gets on, we start again, he's fine. And then he lies. Boom! He lies again. Bam! He lies again. Bam! And my lawyers, they were Jewish lawyers. These guys that came to see me, they were Jewish. These guys, the second set of lawyers I had on my team, it came the day after I had seen Mary. And they're saying, well, we never did believe in the rosary that much, but whatever, keep doing whatever you're doing. But this guy ended up getting caught because every time he'd lie, he'd get a giant whelp, looked like a bee sting. Non-stop. I mean, this guy, I tell you what, when he was in a Green Beret, if the enemy would have caught him, they would have busted him in a second. You could tell when he lied. The next guy they put up there, another Harvard guy, and we pray in the rosary, and we still doing our routine, and we have our faith, and we have our trust in Jesus. And we don't expect this to happen every time. We're not even expecting anything. We didn't expect it the first time. We never expected it. He's the Harvard, all that Harvard stuff and all. He's about 6'3", about 270 pounds. I won't give you his name, but I'll tell you this. He's lying. And I'm going to tell you what we call him. We call him Baby Huey. Because when we get him on a cross, within 5 minutes, we catch him in a perjury, in a lie. Little one, though. And he goes, ah, ah, ah. And he cried like a baby, like Baby Huey. I mean, cry. Couldn't stop him for an hour. They had to stop the court and everything. For an hour, he cried. The next guy they put on the stand, I said, maybe they're going to learn their lesson and they're not going to lie. But no. This guy stayed on the stand 7 days, 9 hours a day on direct examination. 7 days, 9 hours a day. Then when we cross-examined him, we stayed on 7 days, 9 hours a day again, the equal amount of time. And we caught him in exactly 55 perjuries. The judge, the arbitrator, was so sick of his lies and so disgusted with his lack of morals, his lack of ethic, that he couldn't even look at him at the end of the second week. 55 perjuries. Make a long story short, they put on 6 people, and every one of their witnesses got caught lying. Then they come up with a new scheme. They say, but, Mr. Arbitrator, we didn't think we could get our president of Grumman Allied to come because he's such a busy man. But his schedule is open, and even though we didn't schedule him to be a witness, we'd like you to make the exception and let our president come. And guess what he does? The judge says, okay. So we figure, well, we'll get him too. But we got a little problem. They had caught me with the holy water. And they won't drink the water no more. That's okay. We continued to pray and to have faith and to trust in Jesus. And we knew it would be okay. So he comes, the big man comes. And he's lying and lying and lying. And he's getting away with it. This isn't the right place for me to repeat what I told my two Jewish lawyers that night. Because they can't catch him in a lie, and I wasn't happy with him. And even when I was praying a lot, I've never been holy in my whole life, which didn't take much, but it took, purity comes gradually. And I had a lot of purifying to do. So I had some choice words from my lawyers, and they kept saying, but Lou, you need to let this guy go. Some guys make good liars, and they can get away with it, and they hurt you. And I said, I don't know, I don't think, So that morning, I'm on my way to St. Patrick's to pray the rosary, like I do every morning. And I meet them in an elevator, and we get in an argument. And it was the first time I had an argument since our Blessed Mother had appeared to me. I hadn't had any arguments with any human beings. It's at the end of the summer in 1996, maybe the fall. And I felt bad. I said, look, y'all want to let the guy go? Let him go. And then they felt bad, and they said, look, I tell you what we'll do. We'll try a little bit, but if we don't get it, we're just going to let him go. Let the president go, get away with the lie. And because I had this big, long conversation with the lawyers in the hotel, I didn't have a chance to get to St. Patrick's and get back to the court in time. So I said my rosary in the hotel. And then I always have been reverent when I pray. And you got to remember, I was in the formative, this was in the very beginning of my change in life, my conversion, okay? It's in the very beginning of my conversion. But I'm walking down 51st Avenue, smoking a cigarette, and I start praying while smoking. I'm just telling y'all what happened. I'm telling y'all facts and with the truth. And I'm praying, and I'm saying, Michael the Archangel, where are you? Father Paul Bergeron told me you were there in Delaware. Where are you now? This guy is getting away with lying. You're supposed to be the guy that takes care of these evil people, but I said, you're a practical joker. You like to wait till the last seconds. You like to see the fleshly battles first and see how good we can do. And I'm going to tell you, I don't mind fighting. And I don't mind fighting for your cause. I'd love to be a soldier. And I love to be a soldier of Jesus. But look at the argument I just got into with those two lawyers. I'm hoping to convert them, those Jewish guys, to be Catholic. You got to help me. I said, where are you? You're a practical joke. I bet you're laughing up there right now. And I even did this, y'all. I even told him, I said, when I die, if I go to heaven, I'm looking you up. True story. I said, if I died, I'm looking you up. And I forgot about that prayer, Well, that guy gets up there and he starts lying, getting away with it. These New Orleans, hotshot lawyers out of Tulane, they just can't get him. So at lunch they said, we're going to let him go. I said, all right, I don't want to argue anymore because I'm trying to do right at least. And we come back from lunch and they start the court again. And y'all are going to, you really got to listen to this. If you tell me if Michael the Archangel is not a practical joker once I tell you this. He's lying before the lunch, and we hadn't caught him in 2 days. Getting ready to let him go, and he walks up and he takes the witness stand, and there's a court reporter where Pierre is here, stenographer type with the typewriter, and everybody's looking at him in the court. And he opens up a Snickers bar about this big. And then we ask him a question, and he goes, hum. And man, I won't eat candy in that courtroom when I'm on the sidelines. Here he is in the main podium with the stenographer right there, and the judge looking right at him, and we waiting for him to answer. That caramel got wrapped around his teeth. Like E.F. Hutton commercial. We waiting. Then what happened was that he tries to talk, and some little pieces of chocolate spit out his mouth on the table in front of him. Little pieces of chocolate. Guess what the president of Grumman did? He took his finger and he went like this. started shooting the chocolate with his finger like this. Well, now we all, man, everybody's holding him. Man, his lawyer's like this. We're laughing. The judge is like, oh, man. And my lawyer sees that this guy is starting to crack up. So instead of letting him go, he starts to ask him more questions, more questions, more questions. Well, every question he asks, guess what this man does? This is a very, this is their top guy. He gets the next question again. We wait. Yeah. Every question until he finished a jumbo-sized Snicker bar, he does that. And by the time he finished, he had got himself in such a hole. And we caught him in the biggest lie of the whole case, their president. The biggest lie of the whole case. And it was a Friday, and we were going home. And we were so excited, And, my Jewish lawyers were, kind of patting themselves on the back, oh, man, I got him. And it wasn't until we used to travel up there, when we'd come home with about 50-pound boxes of documents. We used to carry 50,000 pages of documents with us. So it took a long time. We got to the New Orleans airport, and we're driving in Parody. Somebody knows the name of that church in Parody? See, we're right there. Because I remember making a sign of the cross. And it dawned on me. Oh, let me tell you a little important point. When he got caught, my wife started laughing. And one of the lawyers said, Miss Saia, it's not appropriate to laugh in the courtroom. Because, she laughed at it. And we're right there in front of the church. And I said, Cindy, why did you laugh? She said, Louis, right before he got caught in the lie and he had finished that candy bar, she said, when he was starting to make faces and his face got red and he was kind of claw-looking hands like that, I said, yeah. She said, what happened was a fly flew in his mouth. And she said, at the moment that fly flew in his mouth and I started to laugh, when he swallowed the fly, I started to laugh. And she said, I don't know why, because I don't pray to him. But Michael the Archangel came into my mind like a picture. Well, so she tells me when she laughed, it was because the fly went in his mouth, and that Michael the Archangel pops in her mind. And you know what I had forgot about my prayer that morning. Remember my prayer? And when I remembered that prayer, for almost a year, well, no, it wasn't a year yet, but for over a half a year, my wife had been hearing about the rose smell from me. But she had never smelt it. And when she told me about Michael the Archangel coming in her mind when the fly flew in the president's mouth, I remembered that prayer while smoking the cigarette walking down 51st Avenue. And I got to tell y'all something. I cried twice in my life with tears from God. First time was on the sidewalk in Delaware. The second time was in that car. Because, the lawyers, they caught this guy. I had never put it together until my wife told me about him popping up in her mind when she laughed in the courtroom. And I remembered that prayer, and I knew, I don't know how to explain it to y'all, but I knew it wasn't my lawyers, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't anything but Jesus Christ. Michael Archangel. I knew. And I cried like I cried on the sidewalk. Because I felt such love coming from Jesus to bestow such great things, to happen like that. And as I cried, the smell of roses got into that car. I had a cigarette lit. You couldn't smell a cigarette. It was like you put 10,000 roses in that car. My wife smelled it for the first time. And the joy and the happiness that we felt wasn't about what happened in the courtroom. It was about knowing how much Jesus loves us. So anyway, I think what I'll do is make it real short. There's more. Maybe I can come back, and if I save a little, I can come back another time. To make a long story short, for those people who don't know me or don't know what happened, we ended up winning the case, and we were awarded all the patents back, even not only our 50% of the patents, but their 50% as well. We got the entirety of the patents back, and we got $26 million. And when they read that verdict, when I was there and they read the verdict and they said, you won the patents and you won the money, I didn't cry. I wasn't so happy. I mean, I was happy, don't get me wrong. But although it was a happy feeling, nothing comes close to the real award, the real victory that I had, which was my conversion. I want y'all to know, the cross I carried was small compared to people who have a child that's sick with a terminal illness, compared to a spouse who has cancer, compared to a marriage which involves a lot of children and a divorce, compared to all the terrible things, victims of violent crimes. People carry big, big crosses in the world today. People in this room carry big crosses. People in this room are I'm not the only one that knows anxiety, and probably a lot of people in here have greater reasons to have had anxiety than I've had in my life. And I hope, if nothing else, the time I've spent here relating the story to y'all, I hope it deepens your appreciation for what faith, the power of faith in Jesus Christ, what it can do in these no-hope situations that we run across in life. You know, these no-hope situations where all the doctors say there's nothing we can do. Or these no-hope situations to where you got a child on drugs. Let me tell you that there is no such thing as no-hope situation. I believe in the deepest parts of my heart that you can tell anyone in this room, anybody in the world who has faith in their heart can order a mountain to topple itself in the sea, and I believe it'll be done if you truly have that faith. I believe that no matter how much despair you're in, and how desperate you may be, and how no hope, no matter how extreme your no hope situation may be, take it from me.